Welcome into another Duck Territory Roundtable. I'm Matt Prehm. We've got Kevin Wade. We've got Erik Skopil on the site, all from DuckTerritory.com. Look, we're talking Oregon football. We're talking Oregon football recruiting. We've got a ton of stuff to get to on today's show. New series. We're doing these roundtables through Zoom, doing some video. Hope you guys enjoy them. If you are not a subscriber to DuckTerritory.com, highly encourage you guys to check that out, because right now you could sign up and get VIP access, get to access to read across the entire 24/7 Sports Network. A monthly membership starts at just $1, and after that goes to $9.95. Or you could get annual membership. We've docked the price off to 30% off. It's $6.26 a month. You're billed up front one time, $75.18. Now, if you choose that monthly feature, I'll give you a little pro tip here. After your first month is over, you get CBS All Access for free. And that is a streaming platform. You get live shows, you get movies, you get news. When sports comes back, you'll get sports on there as well. It's all commercial free. It's all on demand as well. And it's free with your membership to DuckTerritory.com. Going the monthly route is the quickest way to get to the all access for free. You could also do it annually, but you don't get that membership benefit until after your first full year on the site. All right, we've got that out of the way. Now, we've got a lot to discuss on this one. We're going to talk Anthony Brown, the addition at the quarterback position. We'll segue over to some recruiting news that's happened. And then we'll also talk about some news that we got with Cristobal, head coach of the Ducks football program, along the offensive line. Remember, they've got 4 guys that they're replacing along that spot. So we got a good show for today. Let's start this off. Anthony Brown transfers to Oregon after playing 3 years at Boston College. Was a 3-year starter for the Eagles. Played his first freshman year, redshirt freshman year, 3 years ago, but started basically the entire year. And then the last 2 games missed time because of injury. Solid freshman season there. And then junior year, he was pretty solid. And in his sophomore year, he was pretty solid for the Eagles. And then this past season as a junior, it looked like he'd maybe turned the corner. His percentages were up. His yards per completion were up. His touchdowns to interception ratio was up. Production across the board was up. He had a really good game against Louisville before suffering another injury, his second knee injury, that cut his junior season short. And then after Asnero left the program, he decided he wanted a new place to play. And it was originally reported that Oregon would be kind of a favorite, and then nothing happened for a period of time. And then about a week ago, Anthony Brown announced on Twitter that he was grad transferring to Oregon, would be eligible to play right away during the 2020 football season. And here we are today with that information. Now, Erik, why would Oregon bring in a grad transfer right now for the quarterback position? What's the justification for that?
I think it's a really reasonable question, considering even what Mario Cristobal said about Tyler Shuck last Friday, just that he entered the spring as a starter, he exits as a starter. They're very fired up about what they have with him. So yeah, I think there is question of why would they go through this? But I think you also have to remember that Oregon doesn't have a quarterback on the roster with any starting experience, and outside of Shuck, no one's even really stepped on the field before. So they brought in 2 prep quarterbacks in this 2020 class to kind of help figure some of that stuff out. But I think at the end of the day, you wanted someone with some experience to provide that and to kind of act as potentially that safety net if things with Shuck don't work out, or knock on wood here, and I'm knocking on all the wood I can around the apartment, if there's an injury to Shuck, if he's the starting quarterback and he gets knocked out like what happened to Justin Herbert a couple of years ago, you don't want to rely on a new quarterback once again. And we saw that played out even with players on the roster I think we think are more talented than what Braxton Burmeister was a couple of years ago. You just don't know. And I think you learn from history, which tells you want to have as many good quarterbacks as you can on the roster as possible. And look, they went out and they did that. And Brown, to me, feels like a player that is capable of starting. But I still think, and you guys might disagree, I still think this is Tyler Shuck's job to lose. And I don't think this really changes that. But certainly it adds another dynamic to whenever they do reconvene for practice.
Nationally, Kevin, this turned a lot of heads, I think, when the commitment happened. What was the perception that you saw that played out, and just how was this received from a bigger picture scope of Oregon football?
I think Anthony Brown, because he took that visit right before everything shut down, kind of flew under the radar. So it kind of was a huge national splash. And when you look at that like 30,000 foot level about Oregon football, what does the general populace know about Oregon football? Oh, they're losing Justin Herbert.
Right.
Like people that routinely look at Oregon football have been following the bit of spring ball we saw. We're really attuned to the quarterback battle. How is Tyler Shuck going to take over? But the national picture was like, what is Oregon going to do at quarterback? And I think if you look at those national rankings in the preseason from all the different media outlets, Oregon was a top 10, even a top 5 team some places, but the quarterback question was significant. And now that the Ducks have Tyler Shuck, who's kind of earned his way to be named the starter coming out of spring, but then they add Anthony Brown into that mix. I think that's a huge addition to making people say, you know what, the Ducks are going to be fine regardless if it's Tyler Shuck or Anthony Brown. And one thing that I think was pointed out nationally in a few of the interviews he said there were no guarantees made. Oregon was mentioned for a few other grad transfer quarterbacks, including Jamie Newman, who went from Wake Forest to Georgia. And when you look at why he went to Georgia, it was because he was going to be the starter. And I think that the fact that there's no guarantees made means that there will be some form of competition between Shuck and Brown. So I think nationally it was received very well. And I think just positions the Ducks to be even higher in some of those preseason top 25 rankings, especially as we inch closer to the 2020 season. This week, though, I think the other kind of interesting news, recruiting's still pretty shut down, but I think the interesting news that came out of this week is a number of top prospects, including guys that are really high up Oregon's board, released top 8 list, top 6 list, the top 12 list in there with 5-star wide receiver Troy Franklin putting the Ducks in his top 6. On Monday night, Brock Bowers putting the Ducks in his top 8, and then wide receiver Dante Thornton putting the Ducks in his top 12 this weekend. I think that's really top targets. I mean, one of the top tight ends nationally, 2 of the top receivers, though not the top receiver in the nation, who has already included the Ducks in his top list, Emeka Egbuka. Matt, out of those 3, who do you think is most likely to commit to Oregon?
You know, I look at this group, and I think there's a legit chance that Oregon could get all 3. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that one, Kevin, but I mean, I don't think that's a high probability, but I think there's scenarios out there where they land all 3 of those guys. Who Oregon lands, who's most likely to land out of that group, I would lean with Troy Franklin, the 5-star from Menlo Park, California. He's ranked as the 3rd best receiver in the class according to the 24/7 Sports composite. Internally at 24/7 Sports, we're just as high as him as the industry average is. He's the 4th best receiver in the country. You know, you're splitting razor thin, there of the difference of 1 and 2 spots. I think Troy, he's been on campus at Oregon a couple times already. Was at Saturday Night Live. I believe he came up for a football game during the season as well. This is a guy that Oregon's put a lot of attention in towards already. They've invested a lot of time recruiting him. They've developed a good relationship with him. And even though Oregon doesn't currently have a wide receivers coach on the staff, I think they've positioned themselves in a really good spot to be the leader for Troy Franklin. You look at the crystal ball, 3 different crystal balls have been placed. 1 is undecided. 1 is for Washington. I think, Kevin, you got 1 for Oregon. I'm very close as well to put 1 in for Oregon on behalf of Troy Franklin. I think they're the leaders of this recruitment, and I think this is the guy out of those 3 that's most likely to land at Oregon.
Yeah, definitely. I got that crystal ball in after he visited. He was tentatively said he wanted to return again this spring, but because the shutdowns wasn't able to make it. We'll probably see him get on campus, though, sometime in the fall. Erik, I mean, 2 wide receivers and a tight end. How would those guys fill the need for Oregon? I mean, it's kind of a pretty important position, right?
Yeah, it's almost self-explanatory because those are two spots that are probably the biggest needs on the roster. In fact, I'm not sure when this will come up, but we were discussing what Oregon's needs were if you were to put up a hypothetical trade with other schools, and it was pretty clear that wide receiver and tight end, both in the immediate future but long-term, would fill those needs. And you think about when they'd be arriving, Oregon would be losing Johnny Johnson and Jalen Redd, who are their top two returning receivers this year. They'd be gone for that at that point. And then Cam McCormick, Hunter Campmoyer would also have exhausted their eligibility. So I don't think there's any question that adding players of this caliber would fill in some needs. I think these are, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel pretty strongly those are probably your two biggest needs still on the board right now, especially at receiver. And if you could add two players here that would be probably pretty close to that highest regarded, highest rated wide receiver recruits Oregon has signed, that would be massive. And especially when we're talking about this passing attack that still has some question marks with the new quarterbacks coming in, with the new offensive coordinator. Obviously, there would be a year under their belt in 2020 to kind of figure out some stuff, but certainly that would be a very positive development for both the staff, but also for if it is Tyler Shuck or whoever it is at quarterback. They'd love to see these guys come in. Now, switching gears really quickly one last time, we did have an opportunity, the first opportunity since the closure of spring practices and all athletics on campus at basically every part of the country. We had an opportunity last Friday to speak with Mario Cristobal on a teleconference call. I'd say probably like 90% of them dealt with just, how they were dealing with COVID-19, how that impacted their workouts. But I was curious just to see kind of what the spring meant for the offensive line. Matt talked about it on the top of the show here. They lost 4 starters. The one they do bring back, of course, is the big one, Penei Sewell. But certainly a lot of answers, or questions, I should say, that need to be answered. But Cristobal very, very positive about what they got done in those 4 practices. Quote, "I'm really pleased with the progress of the offensive line. I thought we found some answers, and we found them in a hurry. Obviously, guys like Calvin Throckmorton, Jake Hansen, Brady Aiello, Dallas Womack, Shane Lemieux led the blueprint on how to do things up front. These guys have followed it to a T. I'm really pleased with the progress of the offensive line." He then ran through, and there's a story on the site that you can check out for the specifics of it, but he did run through a list of guys that he had been impressed with, and I'll just say the names here. But redshirt junior Alex Forsyth received some praise, redshirt junior Malasala Amave Laulu, redshirt senior Sam Putasi, incoming JUCO transfer TJ Bass, who was here for the spring, was also mentioned. He called Stephen Jones, who's a redshirt sophomore, a player who has a potential to be one of the best players, not just in the Pac-12, but in the country as an offensive lineman. And then also some really positive things he shared about the developments of a couple of other young players in Jonah Toyanu and true freshman Jonathan Dennis, who is also on campus. Kevin, let's turn to you here. I ran through the list of names. Who stands out, or maybe who surprises you that Cristobal seems really excited about?
I think Jonathan Dennis was kind of just like, I think he is the surprise to me of the entire 4 spring practices we got. I mean, coming out of recruit, he committed to Oregon, hadn't even visited, not a lot known about him, that he was from the Miami area, and then shows up on campus and made an impact in his first few practices. I think that's a guy that Oregon fans are going to be pleasantly surprised about. And I think that there's just a lot of buzz regarding the program. I think he could be a guy in line to get some reps playing time as a true freshman, which is pretty impressive considering Oregon's offensive line and some of those other names, especially when you already have Penei Sewell and Stephen Jones, who Cristobal had high praise for on that offensive line.
Yeah, you're right. True freshmen typically don't get an opportunity to start at most schools, Oregon in particular. I know when Penei Sewell opened the season at left tackle a couple of years ago, that was, I think, like the first opening game starter in like a decade or two. Matt, I know it's really hard to say, but do you think there's a chance that this group, just from a talent perspective, could end up being better than what we saw last year? Obviously, experience would not be favored with this year's group, but from a talent perspective, do you think that's a thing we could see happen?
Yeah, and real quick, I want to touch on, I agree with Kevin that Jonathan Dennis was one of the more surprising developments of spring ball, just because, like he said, there wasn't much known about him coming into the program. When he committed, wasn't out of left field. We were prepared for it, but it was one of those deals where he hadn't even visited yet, and he had committed. But as for going forward of can this group be better than last year? I think early on, no. Losing 4 seniors along the offensive line, starting group, your top reserve being another senior, there's going to be bumps in the road. Now, Oregon also is extremely lucky, and maybe luck isn't the right word, but just fortunate that the best offensive lineman in the country coming back is also the one guy that's returning from the starting lineup. Now, I will say halfway through the year, at the end of the season, this group could be playing at a better clip than the one before them, just because if you look at the offensive linemen that they have recruited the last few seasons and who is now being mentioned by Cristobal as guys that stand out, their rankings coming out of high school are significantly higher than everyone that they're replacing across the board. You know, Malastala was the number one offensive line recruit in the junior college ranks. Stephen Jones, I believe, was higher rated than Penei Sewell, or right around there, coming out of high school, and he redshirted last season. Alex Forsythe is a junior that was a 4-star recruit coming out of West Lynn and has sat for the last 2 seasons behind Shane Lemieux. I look at this group and see on paper the talent is better. It just needs to be refined. And so I think early on there's going to be bumps. There's going to be some rocky moments. But at the end of the season, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if that offensive line is clicked and they have found their groove and they are playing at a better level than we saw last season up front along the offensive line. And also just overall development and coaching of that position group. And think about it, Erik, how many coaches do we see at practice that are working with that group?
3, maybe 4. I haven't looked recently. It was 3, I think, for sure.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're going to get a hands-on approach. It's Mario Cristobal's baby, like you said. I think they're going to be really, really talented next season. It's just going to take some time to get Oregon's offensive line back into a groove that they were at last season. So, all right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this roundtable. We're going to keep doing these. First one we did last week, got some good reception on it, so we appreciate you watching. Stay tuned for more. We'll do more of these next week, one a week as well. And if you're not a subscriber to DuckTerritory.com, I highly encourage you guys to jump in on that. $1 for your first month, or you could get 30% off your annual membership. And then when you're paying regular price, monthly or annually, you get CBS All Access for free. That's a streaming platform that's got all of CBS's content, movies, sports, TV shows, all commercial free, on demand as well on CBS All Access. That's for free with your membership when you're paying regular pricing at DuckTerritory.com. So for Kevin, for Erik, and myself, Matt, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.